Christian neighbor called cops on Jewish wedding, then froze when cops saw Groom was mayor. Get that clown off my street now. Robert Sterling shouted as he violently kicked the kosher buffet table, scattering traditional dishes across the asphalt of Oakwood Drive. You Jews think you can do your weird rituals anywhere? Daniel Goldstein's wedding had just begun 15 minutes ago when the 52-year-old neighbor emerged from his house like a storm of hatred. The outdoor ceremony, held under an elegantly decorated chuppah, brought together 80 guests who were now watching in horror as the anti-Semitic attack took place in broad daylight. Call the police. Sterling shouted to his wife Karen, who was already filming everything on her cell phone. These invaders are disturbing our Christian neighborhood with this bizarre sect. Daniel, at 34, never imagined that his happiest day would be marked by such cruelty. Born and raised in a traditional immigrant family, he had worked tirelessly to build a respectable life in that community. His fiancée, Rebecca, trembled beside him, her white dress contrasting with the tears that were beginning to flow. Sterling pointed aggressively at the rabbi. Take off that ridiculous hat and get out of here before I call immigration. His voice was laden with decades of ill-concealed prejudice. You don't belong in this neighborhood. The older guests, many Holocaust survivors and their descendants, instinctively backed away. Daniel's 89-year-old grandmother, Sarah, held his arm tightly. Not again, she whispered in Yiddish, painful memories resurfacing like ghosts from the past. Look at you. Sterling continued his tirade, gesturing wildly. With those weird hats, those black clothes, looking like an invasion of crows. This is America, not Israel. What Sterling didn't know was that Daniel had been observing his suspicious behavior for months. The Confederate flags discreetly hanging in the garage. The whispered comments about certain people during neighborhood meetings. The attempts to block the approval of a Jewish community center in the area. Over the past few weeks, Daniel had noticed Sterling peeking through the window whenever vehicles with different license plates arrived at his house. Once, he even photographed guests visiting Daniel for wedding planning. Karen, are you recording all this? Sterling shouted at his wife. I want evidence of this Jewish invasion to show the authorities. I'll sue every single one of you for disturbing the peace. Daniel gently touched his kippah, an apparently nervous gesture that actually hid a disturbing calm. His eyes revealed the serenity of someone who had weathered far worse storms and learned to turn adversity into strength. Rebecca grabbed Daniel's arm, whispering, "Let's call it off. It's not worth going through this." But Daniel stood firm, discreetly touching a small pin on his lapel that glinted in the afternoon sun. The official symbol was practically invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, but to Daniel it represented 4 years of silent dedication to public service. Mr. Sterling, Daniel said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos, perhaps we can resolve this in a civilized manner. Civilized. Sterling laughed scornfully, spitting on the floor near Daniel's shoes. Do you Jews know what civilization is? Look at this invasion. Loud music, strange food, pagan rituals on our Christian street. Sterling began filming the guests individually, focusing on the small children hiding behind their parents. I'm sending this to the immigration department. I bet half of these people don't even have papers. The crowd of guests gathered protectively around the couple, but Daniel raised his hand asking for calm. There was something in his posture, a quiet authority, that made even Sterling hesitate for a moment. Sterling pulled out his phone again. I'll call the police, the prefecture, whoever is needed. You'll know your place in this town. Daniel watched Sterling with a calculating gaze that few could interpret. During years of building his career in public service, he had learned that the worst enemies were those who revealed themselves completely before discovering who they were really fighting. There, in the face of all the looks of hatred and contempt, Daniel stood his ground like someone guarding a secret too powerful to reveal before the time was right. What Sterling was about to discover would change not only his life, but the entire power dynamic in that community forever. If this story of prejudice and justice has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a moment of anti-Semitism would turn into the most expensive lesson Sterling would ever receive. Sterling pulled out his phone and began dialing 911, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. I need to report an illegal gathering of religious extremists disturbing our peaceful Christian neighborhood. Robert, have you lost your mind? Shouted Mrs. Henderson, the 73-year-old neighbor who lived 3 houses over. These people are just celebrating a wedding. Wedding. Sterling laughed scornfully. That's a pagan ritual. Look at that strange tent. He pointed aggressively at the chuppah. And those men in the black hats look like terrorists. Daniel watched silently as Sterling continued his anti-Semitic tirade. He had grown up hearing similar stories from his grandfather, who had survived the concentration camps. The difference was that now, at 34, Daniel had dedicated his entire adult career to fighting exactly that kind of hatred. Sterling began recording a video on Facebook Live, his voice laden with fake indignation. Guys, I'm here documenting a cultural invasion in our Christian neighborhood. Look how these Jews are trying to impose their weird rituals. Daddy, please, whispered his 16-year-old daughter Jennifer, who had come out to see what was going on. You sound crazy. Crazy is this invasion. Sterling shouted, pointing the phone at her. Jennifer, do you want to grow up in a neighborhood dominated by foreign sects? The teenager recoiled, embarrassed by her father's public outburst of prejudice. Several of her schoolmates were from Jewish families, and she knew that this video would reach them in a matter of minutes. Rebecca held Daniel's hand tightly, whispering, Daniel, let's go. It's not worth it. But Daniel stood firm. During his 4 years in public office, he had learned that running away from prejudice only made him stronger. It was time for Sterling to find out who he was really fighting against. Karen, are you filming all this? Sterling shouted at his wife. I want to send it to the neighborhood Facebook group. Everyone needs to see how these Jews are invading our neighborhood. The live stream already had 47 views, with split comments appearing on the screen. Robert, stop it, wrote one neighbor. This is pure anti-Semitism, commented another. But some were supportive. Protect our Christian community. Sterling read the comments aloud, interpreting any criticism as validation. Look at that. Even our own neighbors have been contaminated by this liberal propaganda. Grandmother Sarah, 89, began to cry silently. Memories of her youth in Nazi Germany came back like a devastating wave. Not again, she whispered in Yiddish. Please God, not again. Sterling noticed the old woman's discomfort and smiled cruelly. Ah, look at that. The matriarch is crying because she knows they've been found out. He moved dangerously close to Sarah's wheelchair. How many of you entered this country illegally? Daniel felt anger rise like lava in his throat, but his voice remained controlled. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you reconsider your words. You suggest. Sterling laughed to his online audience, which was now up to 89 views. Who do you think you are to suggest anything to me? A trespassing immigrant trying to order me around on my own street. What Sterling didn't know was that Daniel had spent the last few years systematically documenting all incidents of racial hatred in his community. As part of a citywide initiative against hate crimes, he had created a comprehensive database that had already resulted in dozens of criminal prosecutions. Sterling began walking among the guests, filming individual faces and making disparaging remarks. Look at this one with a little hat on his head. What kind of man wears a hat all the time? He must be hiding something. He focused the camera on the small children, who were hiding behind their frightened parents. And these children being indoctrinated from an early age. That should be considered child abuse. Rebecca finally couldn't contain herself any longer. How dare you talk about our children like that? What kind of person attacks a family on their wedding day? What kind of person? Sterling retorted, pointing the camera directly at her face. A person who defends traditional American Christian values. A person who will not remain silent while foreign sects destroy our community. The comments on the live stream multiplied. Some people began to recognize Daniel from his work at City Hall. Wait, isn't that the mayor? Someone wrote. Sterling was so focused on his performance that he didn't notice the change in tone of the comments. Rabbi Goldberg, a respected 67-year-old man who had served the community for 3 decades, tried to intervene. My son, there is room for everyone in God's house. Why don't you join us in celebrating love? Don't call me son, you false prophet. Sterling spat on the ground. Jesus Christ is my Savior, not your diabolical sects. You crucified our Lord and now you want to corrupt our children. The historic blasphemy echoed down the street, making even some Christian neighbors visibly uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson, who had initially supported Sterling, began to quietly walk away. Daniel discreetly touched his phone, activating an app that few knew about. For years, he had been developing a rapid response system for situations exactly like this. In a matter of minutes, the right people would be notified of the situation. Sterling continued his performance to his online audience, which was now up to 156 views. Guys, I'm here defending our Christian values against this Jewish invasion. Share this video so everyone can see what's happening in our neighborhoods. Daniel watched every word, every gesture, every display of hatred being carefully documented by multiple cameras. Sterling was digging his own social and professional grave, with no idea of the consequences that awaited him. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Sterling smiled triumphantly at his camera. Listen up. The police are coming to remove this invasion. American justice still works. Daniel smiled for the first time since the conflict began. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, but which revealed the confidence of someone who knows exactly what will happen next. Mr. Sterling, Daniel said calmly, adjusting his tie, I'm sure you'll be very interested to meet the incoming officers. Sterling frowned, confused by Daniel's sudden confidence. Why the hell was that Jew smiling now? Why did he look so calm when he should have been terrified by the arrival of the police? It was when everyone noticed Sterling trembling that something extraordinary began to take shape, not only in the tense atmosphere around the wedding, but above all in Daniel's determined gaze, which now shone with an intensity that made some of those present realize that something definite was about to happen. 2 police cars turned the corner onto Oakwood Drive as Sterling danced for joy on the sidewalk. Finally! Now you'll see what happens to trespassers who disrespect our Christian community. Daniel discreetly checked a message on his cell phone that no one else could see. Confirmed. ETA 3 minutes. Position held. He put the device away with an almost imperceptible smile. Officers Martinez and Thompson got out of their vehicles, observing the scene with professional expressions. Sterling ran towards them like a child showing off a new toy. Officers, thank God. These Jews are having an illegal gathering here on our street. Excessive noise, blocking traffic, disturbing the peace. Officer Martinez, a 15-year veteran of the force, observed the elegant wedding ceremony with confusion. Soft music, tasteful decorations, well-dressed guests conversing in low tones. Nothing remotely resembling the illegal gathering Sterling was describing. Sir, can I see some documentation about this event? Martinez asked Daniel politely. Daniel approached calmly, pulling an organized folder from the inside pocket of his jacket. Certainly, officer. We have all the necessary licenses. His voice carried a natural authority that made both officers instinctively straighten their posture. Sterling interrupted aggressively. Licenses? These people forged documents. I know all the legal procedures in this town. Mr. Sterling, said Officer Thompson, let's check the documentation before drawing conclusions. While Martinez examined the papers, Daniel watched Sterling with the patience of someone who had dealt with difficult personalities throughout his professional career. Over the past 6 months, he had systematically collected evidence of Sterling's problematic behaviors. Mrs. Henderson, who had previously defended Daniel, approached the officers. You need to know that Mr. Sterling has been making very worrying comments about Jewish families for months. I myself heard him talking about keeping certain people out of the neighborhood. Sterling spun around furiously. Henderson, you don't know what you're talking about. I was protecting our values. Protecting? She retorted. You said at last month's meeting that we needed to keep an eye on these guys who were moving in. Everyone listened. Daniel observed the change in dynamic. Neighbors who had initially supported Sterling now backed away, realizing that their own reputations were at risk from association with clearly discriminatory behavior. Officer Martinez, a familiar voice sounded from behind the group. I hope there aren't any problems with Mr. Goldstein's ceremony. Everyone turned to see Captain Roberts approaching, still in uniform after leaving a town meeting. Sterling frowned, confused as to why a police captain would personally show up at a simple disturbance call. Captain Roberts, Daniel greeted with a familiarity that made Sterling swallow. Just a misunderstanding with the neighbor. Sterling watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Why was that Jew talking to the captain as if they were acquaintances? And why had the captain referred to him as Mr. Goldstein with such respect? Mr. Goldstein, Roberts continued, I confirm that all security protocols were followed for your ceremony. Congratulations on the wedding. Security protocol? Sterling exploded. Why on earth would a Jewish wedding need special security protocol? What kind of connections do you have? Captain Roberts and Daniel exchanged a meaningful look. For years, Daniel had worked closely with the police department on community initiatives against hate crimes. His position required regular coordination with law enforcement. Daniel pulled out his phone, accessing a meticulously organized digital folder. Mr. Sterling, it might be appropriate to mention that I've documented over 30 incidents of discriminatory behavior by you in the last 6 months. Sterling laughed nervously, but his confidence was clearly shaken. Documented? Who do you think you are? A private investigator. Screenshots of your posts in Facebook groups attacking Jewish families, Daniel began to calmly enumerate. Audio recordings of your comments during condo meetings. Photos of Confederate symbology on your property. Sterling's face paled. You were spying on me? That's illegal. Not spying, Daniel corrected with professional authority. Documenting discriminatory behavior according to city protocol for hate crimes. Something I do routinely as part of my professional responsibilities. Professional responsibilities? Sterling stammered, his voice coming out strange. What responsibilities? You're just another Jew dash. Watch your next words, Captain Roberts interrupted coldly. They may determine whether this ends as a conversation or a formal complaint. Sterling looked around desperately. His wife Karen was still filming, but now with an expression of growing panic. The neighbors who had initially supported his crusade began to discreetly move away. Jennifer Sterling, his teenage daughter, tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, stop it. You're making our family look terrible on the internet. Our family? Sterling shouted. Our family is being invaded by these. Daniel raised a hand calmly. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you choose your words very carefully, especially considering that everything is being recorded by multiple sources. It was then that Sterling noticed something that had gone unnoticed in his initial fury. Daniel didn't seem the least bit nervous or intimidated by the police presence. In fact, he seemed comfortable, like someone used to dealing with authorities. Daniel checked his watch again. Any moment now, more important people would arrive. People who would completely transform the dynamics of that situation and show Sterling exactly who he had decided to fight against. Officer Martinez, Daniel said professionally, are the licenses in order? Yes, sir. Everything is perfectly legal and properly documented. Special permit for community events, liability insurance, approval from the fire department. Sterling realized that something was fundamentally wrong. Daniel's confidence. The deference of the police officers. The captain's respectful formality. The detailed knowledge of municipal protocols. None of it made sense if he was just another Jewish immigrant invading the neighborhood. Who the hell are you? Sterling whispered, finally asking the right question. Daniel smiled for the second time that afternoon. A smile that carried years of municipal authority and the satisfaction of someone who was about to teach Sterling a lesson about respect that he would never forget. It was when everyone watched Sterling tremble that something extraordinary began to take shape, not only in the tense atmosphere around the wedding, but above all in Daniel's determined gaze that now shone with an intensity that made some of those present realize that something definitive was about to happen, something that would completely redefine the balance of power on that street and possibly in Robert Sterling's entire life. Daniel calmly took out his wallet and held out an official document to Officer Martinez. I'm Daniel Goldstein, mayor of the city for 4 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling stood paralyzed, his face draining of all color as reality hit him like a devastating tsunami. The Jewish invader he had attacked with such hatred was literally the most powerful man in town. Mayor. Sterling stammered, his voice coming out as a strangled whisper. That's impossible. Mr. Sterling, Daniel continued with professional authority, over the past 6 months, I have systematically documented 47 incidents of discriminatory behavior on your part. Anti-Semitic comments during public meetings, attempts to block community projects, and hate symbols displayed on your property. Daniel pulled out his tablet, showing a meticulously organized digital folder. Screenshots of his posts in Facebook groups attacking Jewish families. Audio recordings of his comments during municipal assemblies. Photographs of the Confederate flag in his garage. Sterling staggered back, realizing that every racist word, every hateful gesture had been carefully catalogued by the very person he had tried to humiliate. You were investigating me? As mayor, it's my duty to monitor hate crimes in our community, Daniel explained calmly. Especially when they involve municipal employees or city contractors. It was then that Sterling realized the true magnitude of his catastrophe. His company, Sterling Construction, had municipal contracts worth $1.8 million annually. Maintenance of public buildings, school renovations, infrastructure projects. Everything depended directly on the mayor's approval. My contracts. Sterling whispered, panic taking over his voice. According to Municipal Code Section 15.7, Daniel recited from memory, contractors who demonstrate discriminatory behavior or conduct contrary to community values are subject to immediate contract review, temporary suspension, or permanent cancellation. A Channel 7 news van pulled up around the corner, quickly followed by crews from Channel 9 and Channel 12. The social media algorithm had picked up on the viralization of the confrontation, alerting local newsrooms to the potential of a big story. Reporter Sarah Kim came down with her team, immediately recognizing the explosive situation. Mayor Goldstein, can you comment on this situation? Certainly, Daniel answered professionally for the cameras. Mr. Sterling has just provided additional evidence for a discrimination case I've been investigating for months. Everything has been documented and will be reviewed by the City Council. Karen Sterling, who had filmed the whole thing on Facebook Live, watched in horror as 2,847 people watched in real time. The comments exploded with outrage. He attacked the mayor himself. Sterling is a racist asshole. This guy just destroyed his own life. Sterling tried desperately to get out of view of the cameras, but reporters were already surrounding him. Mr. Sterling, do you have any comment about having verbally attacked the mayor of the city? I didn't know. Sterling stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead despite the mild temperature. Mr. Sterling, Daniel continued methodically, Monday at 9 a.m. there will be a public hearing at the City Council to review all of your government contracts. The community will have an opportunity to testify about your public behavior. Karen's live broadcast had already been shared 1,200 times in less than 30 minutes. WhatsApp groups in the city bombarded the video with comments of outrage and shame. Sterling tried one last desperate gambit. Mr. Mayor, I didn't know who you were. It was a terrible misunderstanding. Daniel smiled coldly, an expression that the cameras caught perfectly. Mr. Sterling, your exact words were "get this nonsense off my street," and "you Jews think you can do your weird rituals anywhere." At no point did you ask me my identity before spouting anti-Semitic attacks. Captain Roberts approached the cameras. Mr. Mayor, would you like to file a formal complaint for hate crime? For the time being, Captain, we will let the administrative process take its natural course. Justice must be measured and appropriate. Sterling watched his life fall apart in real time. His neighbors, who once supported his complaints, now shunned him with visible shame. Mrs. Henderson shook her head in disapproval. Even Jennifer, his daughter, had entered the house to avoid the cameras. Dr. Michael Cohen, one of the guests and a civil rights lawyer, approached Daniel in front of the cameras. Mayor, as a witness to all of this, I can confirm that Sterling violated multiple federal and state hate crime laws. Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Make sure your testimony is available for Monday's hearing. Sterling's phone began to ring incessantly. Concerned customers, suppliers questioning contracts, employees asking about the future of the company. Sterling Construction's reputation was being destroyed in real time. Sterling Construction has 23 employees, Daniel commented to the cameras, showing genuine concern. Any decision on contracts will consider the impact on innocent workers. Justice must be targeted, not indiscriminate. Sterling tried to leave discreetly, but Daniel called out to him one last time. Mr. Sterling, just to be clear, this has been my house for 4 years. I'm your neighbor, your mayor, and now, thanks to your performance today, probably your former municipal employer. The crowd of wedding guests slowly began to applaud. Rebecca held Daniel's hand with pride, realizing that she had married not only the man she loved, but someone who stood up for justice with unwavering dignity. Her 89-year-old grandmother Sarah approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. "My grandson," she whispered in heavily accented English, "today you have honored all those who came before us." Sterling walked back to his house, phone ringing incessantly with calls from concerned reporters and clients. His live broadcast had gone viral, with #SterlingRacist trending nationally in less than an hour. Officers Martinez and Thompson approached Daniel with renewed respect. "Mr. Mayor, we apologize for the initial confusion. We were unaware of the situation." "You acted professionally," Daniel replied. "That's exactly how I expect our police force to respond to all calls, with impartiality and respect." Meanwhile, Daniel adjusted his kippah and smiled at Rebecca. "Ready to finish our ceremony?" That's when everyone realized that Sterling had inadvertently created something extraordinary, not only public exposure of his disgusting attitudes, but also the clear demonstration of how true leadership responds to hate with dignity, evidence, and appropriate consequences, proving that justice doesn't always need to shout to be heard loud and clear, but when it speaks with legitimate authority, it echoes with a devastating force that completely rewrites the rules of the game. 3 years later, Daniel Goldstein stood in the same spot where Sterling had kicked over his kosher buffet table, but now holding a proclamation from the National Mayors Association naming him Municipal Leader of the Year for his initiatives against hate crimes. Sterling's municipal hearing had lasted only 47 minutes. In front of 300 residents packed into the council chamber, witness after witness recounted years of discriminatory behavior. His company lost all municipal contracts worth $1.8 million, driving Sterling Construction into bankruptcy within 6 months. Sterling tried to sell the house on Oakwood Drive, but the viral video of his anti-Semitic attacks appeared in any Google search of his name. No buyer was interested in the property of the mayor's racist neighbor. He ended up losing the house to the bank and moving into a one-bedroom apartment in another city. "Ironic," Rebecca commented during their 3rd wedding anniversary, held in the exact same location. "Sterling tried to drive us out of the neighborhood and ended up driving himself out." The transformation of Oakwood Drive has been extraordinary. The viral incident inspired the creation of the Goldstein Tolerance Center, funded by national donations from people touched by the story. Children of different religions and ethnicities now played together on the new community playgrounds. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had defended Daniel on that terrible day, became chair of the welcoming committee for new residents. "I learned that neighborliness is not about who looks like us," she said during an interview for a documentary about the case. "It's about who builds community with us." Daniel's political career has blossomed. Her dignified handling of the situation with Sterling attracted national attention, resulting in invitations to speak at universities about leadership during crises. A book about the incident, When Hate Meets Dignity, became a national bestseller. The former Sterling Construction office was transformed into a free community medical clinic, serving families regardless of socioeconomic status or background. The sign at the entrance read, "Unity Medical Center, where all are welcome." Sterling tried to return to construction in another city, but employers would do basic Google searches before hiring. His reputation preceded him. He ended up working as a night security guard in a shopping mall, earning in a month what he used to make in a morning. During an interview 3 years later, Daniel was asked if he felt sorry for Sterling. "I feel sorry for anyone consumed by hatred," he replied thoughtfully. But Sterling chose his path. Our community has chosen another. Rebecca, now director of a state cultural integration program, often used their story in workshops. "That terrible day taught us that dignity always trumps hate, and that real justice doesn't have to be shouted to be heard." The original video of Sterling's attack was still used in police training on how to deal with hate crimes. His words, "Get that clown off my street," ironically became a symbol of how prejudice self-destructs when confronted with real leadership. The last time anyone saw Sterling was in a convenience store at 2 a.m., buying instant noodles with quarters. The man who once controlled millions in municipal contracts was now counting pennies to survive. Daniel established a scholarship for young victims of religious discrimination. Sterling inadvertently funded this, he joked during the inauguration ceremony. His intolerance created opportunities for those he was trying to marginalize. The Jewish community on Oakwood Drive has grown by 300% in 3 years. Families from different backgrounds have moved to the neighborhood, attracted by its reputation for tolerance and inclusion. Real estate values increased by 40%, making the area the most desirable in the city. Sterling had tried to preserve its traditional Christian neighborhood, and ended up creating the most diverse and prosperous neighborhood in the region. His attempt to divide resulted in unity. His effort to exclude generated inclusion. His intention to destroy built something beautiful. 3 years later, as Daniel cut his wedding anniversary cake surrounded by neighbors of all religions and ethnicities, a child asked, "Mayor Daniel, why was that man so angry?" Daniel smiled, adjusting his kippah. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't know. But when we respond to fear with love, and to hate with dignity, we create something greater than any of us alone. The lesson of Oakwood Drive echoed nationally. True strength lies not in destroying those who attack us, but in building something so beautiful that it makes hatred irrelevant. Daniel turned the most painful day of his life into the catalyst for a community that Sterling could never have imagined, where differences are celebrated, not feared. Sterling tried to break up a marriage and ended up building a community. He tried to diminish a man and ended up elevating a cause. The best revenge was not to retaliate for his cruelty, but to create a legacy of love that would last for generations. If stories of overcoming injustice inspire you, subscribe to the channel to discover how dignity always wins over hate, and how true leadership turns adversity into an opportunity for growth for an entire community.